Yeah, I didn't see more questions or more new questions. There was just the one from or by David from quite the beginning for you, Devin, regarding Visual CGA, if it helps regarding the improving your workflows and so on. So maybe we can open up the discussion for that to basically anybody in the audience who has used Visual CGA before and what are the experiences. Let me know in the chat if you cannot activate the camera or mic. I might need to click something, but let me know. Nothing so far. So I didn't use it either yet. I didn't have the luxury, the privilege. So regarding Visual CGA, I mean, that would be cool. Maybe a question for you, Michael. That would be really cool to see that being extended also for the streets, right? I would assume that this should be directly possible.
Yes, basically the streets are, so the internal design of the rules is already quite ready for usage with Visual CGA. So, I mean, the great idea with Visual CGA is that we have this, that you make everything a component and then you can assemble the components. And so we paid great attention when we designed the lane rules, that it's actually already in this format of components. We didn't do it in the end with Visual CGA for other reasons, but yeah, I mean, it's VCGA ready, so to speak.
What maybe I can compound on that or add to that. So I didn't perfectly see it before. So when you select a street, or actually when you add a lane, those are not separate start rules, which are generated, or sorry, not separate start rules, separate shapes. That it seems to be a new concept that where you have a shape, you have kind of sub shapes that also need some sort of different component selection mode to add rules to them, or how did that work? Because I thought I saw the start rule just start, but it's actually multiple sub-shapes. Can you maybe expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. Probably I should have done that already in the talk, as I see. Yeah, so the idea is basically when you draw a street segment, when you have worked with streets so far, we know that you could select a sidewalk or the roadbed lane. And now it's kind of when you draw the street segment and then you select it, then you can also select individual lanes. And on each of the lanes, you can now put an individual rule. And then from the rule perspective, internally, for the rule, it looks like it's on a normal shape. So if you have, let's say, 5 lanes, you put 5 different rules on those lanes. For each of the lane rules, it looks like it's a completely individual shape.
Why did you choose to make it basically manually selectable and manually editable and not wrap this concept in CGA?
Yeah, this was actually discussed, but in the end, we decided that what we think is cool and what we really like is this, let's say, this drag and drop experience, so that you can go first, as I did in the very beginning of the demonstration. First, you put a few lanes into your street segment. Also, visually, you just go there and click add, and then you can go to Esri and you can really take your rules and just drag them onto the individual lane. So really constructing a street configuration or a street segment just using the mouse and drag and drop, and without any, let's say, more complicated concept inside CGI. I mean, you would always be completely free to write some sort of master rule that switches between different lane rules. User can do that if this serves a purpose, but we think that for most cases, or let's say for this general workflow, that it's best to have individual rules, and that shapes are more or less individual. Yeah, that lanes are individual shapes, as seen as from the VCJ perspective. Yeah.
Dmitry is already waiting to use that in his AI simulations.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, this looks pretty cool. Our workflow heavily depends on the street editor inside CityEngine, so yeah, definitely looking forward.
I hope I'm not speaking out of school here, but I've been messing around with this new street for the last couple of weeks, and I think Matt, like you, I tried to take my street rule and apply it, and I quickly abandoned it in favor of here's a rule for on-street parking, here's a rule for traffic, here's a rule for a center median, here's a rule for a parkway, here's a rule for a sidewalk. And so I basically had to deconstruct my my rule into, like, say, 6 separate rules. And the amount of control, I think, is I think there's a couple benefits. I think we're going to have a lot more control over what happens across a cross section of a street. But the other thing I think it did is it makes it way less intimidating. The mastering streets. I mean, I think there's a reason why we basically have the complete street rule, and that's it. It's because getting in and starting to figure out how those shapes are created, how they're applied, UV space versus unit space, the texture coordinates. There, it introduces a whole other level of complexity into CGA, and this kind of gets rid of all that stuff. It just allows you to focus on the shape, which is either lane. So I did like it. The thought of sort of creating now a master rule that can then apply to a whole street. I think I got some feedback for the CityEngine team. There's, I think, one impediment that if we can figure out, and it's almost like we need like a split index for each of these lane shapes, left to right. Right now they're kind of all individual, and I don't know if I'm not on the. They gave me a build that was ready for, I guess, an alpha release before it goes into beta, and so I think if there's some additional attributes that we can get added onto these shapes, then I think you could reassemble a new master rule. But I did like how it gave real specific control over each of those segments.
Christian wanted to intervene, and there was another question, but Christian maybe has something to say specifically for this. He raised his hand.
Yes, hi everyone. I just wanted to add to this discussion, and I think Michael already mentioned it. So this decision whether we want to go in the direction of, well, if we want to favor this approach where we have one rule per lane, whether or go for one rule that is applied basically to a segment and is then applied to the lanes. Some arguments already have been mentioned. Another one is the inspector gets simpler. So I think that's also one part of the intimidation that those complex rules bring with them. And then the other thing is really we hope that users start to adapt existing lane rules to their own needs. more than this has been done in the past. And to support that, we favor those smaller rules, which are also easier to understand for CGA users that are on their way to become experts.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's super easy. If you want to have another rule, you can just write it. There's no need to understand, let's say, a huge super rule like the complete street rule, but you can really just create, if you want, an extremely simple rule for a special purpose. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks for the additional comments. I find it fascinating that that the approach that was chosen was basically kind of stripe based, or you could say as based on the shape that we have at the moment, or kind of the street shape with the two sidewalk shapes, and work with these stripes and not kind of revamp the system or almost re-implement the system based on the notion of graphs. By adding graphs, and because of the kind of, I got inspired by this comment, by the question that I mentioned before, coming from Monica, kind of because of the notion of like the center line, not of the street, of the entire street or of the street shape, but of the center line of, or the semantic meaning of a lane, which is kind of has a nature of a line. And a street is basically a bunch of lines kind of going in this direction and also in the other direction, also from the point of view of simulating traffic later on, that has to be continuous, weaving in and weaving out. Or there's even though that you have, for example, one lane, that there's a bump that where the street gets wider, so you have just a bus stop which can go back in. So it's like a distorted shape. But anyway, I digress. It's just an interesting thought to basically come from the shape that is already existing and subdividing it and making access to that more, let's say, intuitive versus kind of re-engineering the graph system that is more from the traffic flow kind of thing, and then shape the mesh that is actually corresponding to the underlying, let's say, line network, which is defining the traffic. But again, getting too complicated. But
No,
yeah.
I'll just say this, Matthias. What I was able to do, and I think this allowed it to happen a lot more easily, is local edits on a sidewalk shape to do a bus bump out or to do a driveway. And that was always some of the things I would kind of struggle with. We'd have these street networks with curbs and sidewalks and maybe a parkway, but if they were adjacent to let's say I was using a community's existing GIS information and I had a parking lot, that parking lot would be disconnected from the street because there's no sort of entry or drive. And I didn't want to create a node which would create a crosswalk and all this other stuff. And so what I'm able to do now is make a local edit on the sidewalk and the parkway. And instead of making it grass and concrete, I make it the same material as the parking lot. So it just becomes a much more, I don't know. I think, like I said, we'll have a lot more flexibility on when and where to apply different rules.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. With, for example, local edits, we didn't work with that already because, let's say, for the first version, we really focused on just having those lanes. And as soon, I mean, exactly as I've shown, we have this idea of the lanes that are just stripes that go all along the whole segment. And as soon as we also start to not just do, let's say, the transversal subdivision, but also along the length of the street, then everything gets just way more complicated. We already had very interesting discussions when it was about how do we place the crossings. So now we decided, well, crossings are a bit special, we allow that they are really part of a lane. But for all the other stuff that is more or less distributed along the length, or is a special thingy along the length, we decided that this at the moment is not part of the lane rule. So this would be handled maybe by short segment that you have to add, for example, for a bus stop, or also, for example, yeah, as you said, local edits. We didn't try that, but would be an interesting idea, yeah.
So that means CityEngine 2025.1, right?
And no summer vacation, and yeah,
No more sleep.
no more sleep, yeah.
So that I don't forget, there was a question coming in from Monica. So let me address that. So will there ever be a possibility to export into OpenFlight format? Also, are there any tutorials or lessons outside of the ones that can be downloaded in CityEngine? My Esri doesn't have any, and as an artist, I struggle with the programming side of CityEngine. Yeah, so OpenFlight, maybe for those that don't know, that's more like a simulation kind of file format. Yeah.
Yeah, the export, as far as I know, for this version, we won't have an export, but for the next, we will have an export format that we are currently working on. And I'm not sure whether we plan to do exports for specific format, but certainly for our own export format that will be openly documented so that you could take it and use it in another application. Yeah. So it's possible to export the street configs, but I'm not quite sure into which formats. Yeah.
I'm not actually perfectly sure. Maybe I got this a little bit to segue into the streets, but I mean OpenFlight, that might be something that is actually related also to the streets and street lane information. Not necessarily, but yeah. So regarding tutorials, that's definitely something that is coming up now and then. So Monica mentioned that her Esri, I guess, distributor or so doesn't have any, and as an artist, she's struggling with the programming side of CityEngine. So are there some let's say some spearheading like operations going in this direction at the moment?
So in a very general sense,
I would say, yeah, this was more opening up the field. So
yeah,
maybe there's somebody else also that can join in that knows a little bit more. Otherwise, we're just chatting.
yeah, Christian is probably the one who knows. Yeah.
Sure, come on in.
Okay, yeah, I still struggle a bit with this user interface. I'm sorry. I'm so accustomed to Teams. It's on the other hand, it's revelating. But yeah, so back to Monica's question. Tutorials. So we are working. So as many of the CityEngine community know, our tutorials were in a very non-ideal state for a very long time. This is since about 1 or 2 years improving dramatically, which means we are now moving towards the point where all tutorials are updated and are in a good state to learn CityEngine. Now, in this regard, my question back to Monica would be whether she's missing specific topics that are not covered in tutorials, or maybe the format is something she's struggling with. So this would be very interesting to hear. And the second thing regarding struggles with CGA, here my question would be whether VCGA was something for her, whether she tried out VCGA. And one reason why we built this system was that we hoped to give an alternative and low barrier access to procedural modeling in contrast to CGA programming, classic CGA programming. So these would be the questions that I have for her.
I mean, I'll definitely let her reply, or maybe she can chime in. I'm not sure if she's online at the moment, but
Or
just
if she wants to get in touch with me directly afterwards, I don't know if she's around. Just hand her over my contacts. I'm happy to discuss with her.
of course, we'll certainly do that. Yeah. I mean, I see two sides, and I mean, in the comment, she mentions that she struggled with the programming side of CityEngine because she's an artist, which I guess we all can relate to. That on the one hand side, there's learning CityEngine, the, let's say, drawing streets and so on, and designing rules. That's done really fast. But the access to kind of content, I guess, so you don't have to program and you can just assemble the stuff with Visual CGA. That's something where I think for a couple of years the community would have been the place to provide this, right? And there's just, I guess, one major bottleneck that has been around and has not been solved is to be able to push rule packages in a safe and secure manner that are locked, right? That's been known, and that's definitely been something that prevents people from actually creating rules and sharing them because of the commitment and the copy protection that is at the moment still missing. And I guess it's not a question, or if that's solved, then the tutorial thing will be much easier, and the rule creation and the rule sharing and the community being enabled, the technical people that want to do those things, they can share as much as possible. But that's the one bottleneck which just sadly was not yet addressed. But I think this might be something that or is for me still fundamentally limiting, right? But I mean, maybe Monica can chime in, or she has some specific different aspects regarding this. But step by step, right? Yeah, let me see if there's other questions. Export open flight? No, not yet so far. Who has something that should be addressed that hasn't been speaking so far, that there's something that is urgent or wants to share or meet people here in the chat, or in like with the camera on? Who wants to move things into a different direction? Seems all good so far. All right, then I'll just ask a couple of things from my side. So, Dmitry, what are the next steps that your teams will be working on? If you can share something that kind of to move on. I mean, you mentioned that there's prototyping, or you guys are still prototyping these things. I'm picking up also that Devin was able to kind of alpha test or beta test some of the street features. Is that something that you intend to also potentially do with not just the Lighthouse clients, but maybe alpha beta test or allow people to alpha and beta test this on this AI or generative AI side of things?
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty of things which we envision to bring in here. But of course, the short-term plan here is to take this solution and run by a few Lighthouse customers, collect the real-world feedback experience, polish the product, polish the function, not the product, polish the solution, polish the functionality, and then bring it to the product management to decide on the inclusion as the native functionality of CityEngine. That's our goal for 2025. From the functional standpoint, right, where we can push it further, and I mean, it's not a secret because it is a fairly common practice in the urban planning. There are multiple stages, right, and multiple optimization tasks, which are being run by the planners to make the master plan feasible, proved with numbers of high quality standards for the guests and for the residents, first of all, for businesses. Right. So what are the next functional things? Well, we are right now in collaboration with ETH Zurich postdoc working on streets optimization. Right. We build a massing model. We can simulate the congestion. We can simulate the traffic, which is ignited, which is produced by the residents, guests, the workers, right, the public transportation, which is happening throughout the business day, throughout the weekend. We can visualize this congestion, historical for the existing urban fabric, and project it or evaluate it for the given urban design, and blend them together, warn the planner about a potential bottleneck. Right. Then the planner can come and use a semi-automated solution to, for example, change the lane count or maybe remove some streets, right? Change the speed limits, or maybe add some streets even, right, for the brownfield developments. And again, redo the massing, redo the facility allocation, and see quickly within this workflow, within the CityEngine, the impact of that street augmentation. And again, compare that side by side, right, as I showed in my demo before. So that street network optimization, given the historical and projected congestion, is an important thing which we are looking into. Again, this is a standard task for the urban planners, so no secrets here. Similarly, for the utility networks, right? Again, another standard task of urban planner, right? Does my electric grid support, has enough capacity to support this new development, right? What are the changes? Where does it need to go, right? You can take it further and run flood analysis down the road. We can also see the plumb analysis and the natural ventilation. But this is all the downstream analysis tasks which can be done on top of the massing study, and on top of LOD 1.3 building shapes, which can again be included into this cycle of detailed master planning further down the road. But we are talking about probably like, this is long-term story. But again, this is something which I think is up to product management to prioritize, and there are tools for that, of course. Yeah, there are ideas how we can bring this all together and package into a seamless user experience, which will make the urban planners efficient. Did I answer your question?
Yeah. No, that's good. But I definitely, I mean, it's really cool that, to see the option or in general the adoption of new technologies within CityEngine, and also that like the early adopter programs are basically more and more opened up also to these advanced use cases. So that's really cool to see. But definitely, I mean, the urban planning, there's so much that can be done on the optimization, and it's necessary to, as Jack would say, to make this world a better place. But I do see that there are so many like things that interact when planning a city. Let's say groundwater when you want to place a hospital needs to be considered. If there's groundwater, let's say a foot or two or whatever below surface level, it's really, or whatever the reason are based on geology or any of the other kind of aspects, you cannot compress these things in optimizing 5 or 7 like walking distance simulation, right? So the system is magnitudes more complex, but it's definitely like cool to see that there's this tendency of optimizing certain things which can be automated more and more, and then take the next step, right? Because a lot of the, let's say, network analysis or I mean GIS analysis and location analysis has been around for a long time, but the stuff has been really slow to let's say to put into action. And now models that can be taken or trained to optimize things that can just lead into the next generation of let's say tools to make things more optimized.
That's the goal, and one step at a time, indeed. And that's why human in the loop is a very important component here. It is a vital component. There's so many rules, there's so many historical traditions and aspects and regulations. Every local government is unique, and we need to have local expert, the human in the process, the decision maker, who indeed says yay or nay on the final solution.
I value this statement extremely much, because you just specifically said the planner, the specialist, or whoever it is, the human component needs to be there at the center of the control. That's a kind of completely different sentiment in the context of AI or generative AI as what you see it in other creative industries, where it's just kind of where you're just trying to clone things and eradicate jobs away or optimize jobs away. So that's very much appreciated.
Yeah, human at center. And this is a productivity tool, a productivity boost, not a replacement for humans. Yeah, just to make things more efficient, more faster, let the human be more creative and focus on what she or he is doing best.
Yeah, are there more comments or more thoughts from also from the others? There's a bunch of people in the call. Let me just see. Some people are in here twice. Yeah, no, but I mean this has been great so far. I don't think we need to, as Michael mentioned in the beginning or before, like we don't need to artificially prolong this. But I would say if there's no immediate questions or comments coming in right now, there's always the option to send them in afterwards, right? Yeah, I would say let me then close at this point, just wrap it up with the last couple of slides, which I have ready or to present, and then we can add more discussions via email or whatever.